My life imploded the day I lost everything. Hey guys, today I'm sharing a story that's been eating at me for years. 4 years ago, my world came crashing down. I found out that my wife, Violet, wasn't just cheating on me, she was doing it with my best friend, William. But the nightmare didn't stop there. The real gut punch came when the truth about our daughter, Jade, finally came out. The little girl I loved, the one I'd spent 4 years raising and protecting, wasn't mine, she was William's. I couldn't believe it. I thought Violet was just saying it out of anger, but the DNA test confirmed it. It crushed me. My whole life felt like a lie, and I was drowning in pain. The worst moment? Seeing William, with that arrogant smirk, holding Lily's arms. He stood there, right in front of me, eyes gleaming with satisfaction, and Violet, by his side, looked cold and heartless. Then William said it, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "Thanks, buddy, for giving me your wife and daughter." It felt like a knife twisting in my chest. I just stood there, numb, as they walked away. Jade in Lily's arms. The world seemed to fade away, leaving me with an emptiness I'd never felt before. After a bitter divorce, everything crumbled. My daughter went with Violet, our assets were split, and our home, once filled with laughter, became empty and cold. I was lost in a deep pit of sadness, struggling with betrayal and emptiness. I neglected myself, hid away from the world, and even my family couldn't reach me. They couldn't watch me sink further, so they finally got me to go on a blind date. I went reluctantly, not expecting anything good. My life was a mess and love, it seemed, was a distant dream. I walked into the restaurant and there she was, Fiona. She was different. She was calm, confident, and even a little bit alluring. Her long hair cascaded down her shoulders, her smile held a mystery, and her eyes were both gentle and sharp. I wasn't ready for this at all. Fiona spoke first, her voice soft but direct. "Take a seat. No need to be nervous. This is just a meeting, nothing more." I sat down, trying to appear nonchalant, but I couldn't hide my true feelings. "My brother dragged me here. I bet you were dragged here too, right?" She chuckled, her eyes fixed on mine, but not in a judgmental way, more like a calm understanding. "Actually, no, I came here willingly." Her answer surprised me. I was silent for a moment, studying her. "Really? Willingly? I've never heard anyone say that in this situation. I don't believe in waiting for things to happen. Sometimes we need to take a step forward and change our lives. Don't you think so?" Her words made me think about my own lost months, my days spent dwelling in the shadows. I'd been living in numbness and pain for too long, but seeing Fiona, I realized there was something different. I sighed and blurted out, "It sounds so easy when you say it." It isn't easy, but if you keep living in the past, you'll miss all the opportunities in the present. Think about it. Maybe someone important is sitting across from you right now. I froze. Her words were both gentle and challenging. Fiona was not a woman who simply waits. She's proactive, strong, and that made me realize I needed to wake up. We started talking, and what I expected to be a meaningless date became a meeting that made me think hard. "I'm not here to make you forget the past, but I can be here to help you start something new." After our date, I couldn't deny that Fiona was interesting, even if I was still a little hesitant. As we were leaving, she looked at me, eyes bright with confidence, and raised an eyebrow like she was considering something. Fiona smiled gently. "Next time we meet, I'll have a big surprise for you." I scoffed, pretending to be uninterested, but honestly I was curious. Still, I played it cool, not wanting to show any emotions. "A surprise? Huh? Yeah, we'll see." She just smiled and said nothing. She seemed used to my guarded nature, but she wasn't deterred. We stood up, left the restaurant, and went our separate ways. I walked away, but I couldn't stop thinking about her last words. A part of me felt like Fiona was truly special, but I wasn't ready to trust anyone after everything that had happened. On the way home, I told myself I wouldn't get my hopes up. I'd learned not to let anyone hurt me again. But even as I said those words, a small glimmer of excitement peeked through, though I didn't want to admit it. Days turned into weeks, and I'd almost forgotten about Fiona. Life went on, and I stopped expecting anything. Things seemed to be falling back into their familiar rhythm. Then, one night, while I was sitting in front of my computer, my phone lit up. It was a text from Fiona. I raised an eyebrow and looked at the message on the screen. "Go to your balcony and look down." I was a little confused, but curiosity got the better of me. I stood up, went out to the balcony, and looked down. In the dim glow of the streetlights, I saw Fiona standing there, in the cold winter night. She was bundled up in a thick coat, a beanie, gloves, and warm socks, but she was still shivering a little. When she saw me, she waved and called out, her voice faint in the wind. "Come down. I have something for you." I scoffed, a little annoyed. She had suddenly appeared at my doorstep, in the middle of the night, in freezing temperatures. I quickly found my jacket, put it on, and slowly went down the stairs, trying to appear calm. When I opened the door and stepped out, Fiona turned around, immediately smiling, her hand outstretched, holding a small box. I furrowed my brow, confused. "What is this?" Fiona looked at me with confidence. "Take it. It's a gift for you." I hesitantly took the box, still wondering why she knew my address. "How did you get my address and number?" Fiona smiled and shrugged. "I just asked your family." She didn't seem bothered by my question, and she urged me to open the box. I hesitated, but curiosity got the best of me. When I gently opened the lid, a pale knitted scarf emerged. It was carefully crafted, every stitch meticulously made, clearly a labor of love. Fiona smiled softly, her voice full of pride. "I knitted this for you. It's cold, you need it. Take it, and don't refuse." I was surprised. I didn't expect Fiona to knit a scarf for me. A strange feeling arose in my chest, something more than the initial indifference. She had come all the way to my house, in the cold, just to give me this scarf. Before I could say anything, Fiona stepped closer, took the scarf, and gently draped it around my neck, her hands deft and warm. Fiona said softly, "Stay warm." I stood there, letting her do it, not knowing what to say. Something inside me was shifting. After putting the scarf on me, Fiona smiled softly, stepped back, her eyes still holding their usual gentleness and confidence. "I just came to see you. I'm going now." She said goodbye, waved, and turned to disappear into the cold night. I stood there, watching her small figure fade into the darkness under the streetlights, a strange feeling growing in my chest. The scarf was soft and warm against my skin, but it was the warmth she brought into the cold night that truly touched me. I laughed, a faint, surprised laugh, the first time I felt even a little bit of lightness in my heart after so long. The scarf might have been a small gift, but the way Fiona appeared and her genuine concern made me feel like something had changed. I turned and went inside, keeping the scarf around my neck, wondering if Fiona's appearance was the first step in pulling me out of the darkness. As I spent more time with Fiona, our relationship began to change. Fiona was always proactive. She wasn't afraid to text, call, or show up unexpectedly with simple reasons, like wanting to go for a walk, watch a movie, or just grab coffee. At first, I kept my distance, hesitant to open up, but her persistence slowly chipped away at my walls. She didn't just appear when I needed someone. She helped me forget the pain of the past, one little step at a time. Fiona was a breath of fresh air, bringing the lightness and energy I'd lost while drowning in sadness. One time, as we sat in our favorite cafe, Fiona looked at me with sparkling eyes, her smile never fading. "You know, I'm not the type to give up easily. You won't get rid of me that easily." I laughed, this time a comfortable, genuine laugh. She always had a way of making me feel at ease, even when I tried to put up defenses. With her constant initiative, we started to get closer. It wasn't a burning, passionate love from the start, but a relationship built on patience, understanding, and the trust Fiona slowly instilled in me. Time passed, and I stopped trying to keep my distance. I started to open up, and finally, we officially became a couple. There was no grand proposal or elaborate romantic words, just a moment where we both knew we belonged together. When our families learned of our happy news, their joy and excitement couldn't be contained. My parents, who'd seen me go through months of pain, finally saw their son finding happiness. Fiona's family was equally thrilled, and soon both sides were discussing the prospect of becoming in-laws. That weekend, I was invited to a mutual friend's birthday party. My band, I'm a musician, was asked to perform, and even though I was no longer involved with Violet, I was excited to be making music again. But my joy was short-lived. As I prepared in the dimly lit hall, I glanced across the crowd and saw William, Violet's ex, my former best friend, standing near Fiona, trying to strike up a conversation. A wave of tension washed over me. This wasn't the first time he'd overstepped. I remembered the last time we were at this friend's place. William, unaware that Fiona was my fiancée, had flirted with her in the most blatant way. It had not only angered me but had also driven Violet crazy. It was clear that William's infidelity didn't stop with her. This time I watched from a distance, and a dark part of me felt a little satisfaction. If he had the chance, William would surely repeat what he and Violet had done to me. And maybe, just maybe, this was Violet's chance to feel the exact pain I had endured. I stood back, watching William, my former best friend, trying to charm my fiancée as if it was a game. I didn't rush. I slowly moved towards them, wanting to see what he would do and how Fiona would react. William, with his arrogant smirk and that fake smile, winked at Fiona, raised his glass, and said in a voice full of confidence and arrogance, "William, hello, beautiful. Seems like you're lost and lonely. Would you mind if I join you for a drink?" Fiona, clearly uncomfortable, maintained her composure. She wasn't the type to lose her cool in front of someone like William. "Fiona, oh no, I'm waiting for my guy." William's eyebrows shot up, surprised, but instead of backing down, he pushed further. The smirk widened, and his hand grazed Fiona's delicate fingers, as if it was a chance encounter that sent shivers down her spine. He lowered his voice, trying to whisper sweet nothings, but it was clearly calculated. What lucky bastard gets to keep a lady waiting like that? I wouldn't mind keeping you company. I wasn't sure if William was trying to flirt with Fiona again, but the annoyance started to simmer within me. Just as I was about to intervene, Fiona abruptly turned, gracefully walked towards the stage, as if she didn't care about him. She glanced at William, a hint of sarcasm flashing in her eyes before she rolled her eyes, as if it was all a ridiculous joke. Her actions made me stop, my heart sinking a little, but not out of worry but because of the absolute calm Fiona was displaying. I gave her a thumbs up, asking if she was okay, and instantly she gave me a thumbs up back, a slight smile playing on her lips. The message was clear: everything is under control. Still, the anger simmered within me. I took a deep breath, decided to go back to preparing for the performance, but my eyes couldn't leave William. I knew Fiona was smart and capable enough to handle the situation, but with William, I could never trust him. Feeling slightly reassured, I stepped onto the stage with my band, ready to perform. As the first notes of music filled the air, I focused all my attention on the song, the gentle melody calming the entire room. The music resonated, bringing a sense of peace, and I started to feel like things were settling down. As I reached the outro, I instinctively glanced at Fiona. She was standing there, arms crossed, eyes fixed on the stage, filled with pride and support. Her look calmed my heart a little, feeling like she was always there, supporting me silently but steadfastly. But then, as if the nightmare was repeating itself, I saw William hovering around Fiona again. He had the audacity to keep trying to get her attention, and this time my anger flared up intensely. Even while performing, my blood started to boil. I gripped the microphone in my hand, and as I reached the crescendo of the song, I used my full vocal range to unleash my anger and frustration into the music. It wasn't a regular melody anymore. It was the release of the rage I had bottled up, the rage that wanted to punch him in the face right then. My eyes darted across the crowd, and if I remember correctly, Violet was also there. But what was she doing in this situation? Why couldn't she control her lover? He was causing trouble and bothering Fiona, and Violet was gone, not intervening or restraining William. I didn't know what was going on in her head, but for me, it was irresponsible. That simmering anger continued to spread within me, and even though the song ended with the audience's applause, my mind was fixated on one thing: William had crossed the line. And if he continued, nothing good would happen. As the performance finally concluded, I received thunderous applause from the audience. Even though everyone was energized by the music, my mind was still buzzing. I bowed to the crowd, thanking them, but immediately stepped off the stage to get some air. Stepping outside, I hoped to clear my head of the anger that had been simmering throughout the performance, but the sight before me made my blood boil instantly. In the distance, under the dim yellow lights, Fiona was sitting on a bench, and who was standing next to her? None other than William. With his usual audacity, he was trying to strike up a conversation with her. It seemed breaking my marriage wasn't enough for him. William wanted more. He wanted to destroy everything I had again somehow. He just wouldn't let go. I stood there, feeling like my chest was being squeezed, and only one thought occupied my mind: no, there's no way he gets to hurt me again. Rage surged through me, and I saw William lean down, trying to capture Fiona's attention by whispering something in her ear. Even from afar, I could tell it was his sweet, honeyed voice. Fiona, with a cold expression and arms crossed, clearly wasn't interested in his story, but William's presence was too uncomfortable. It was a line he shouldn't have crossed. In that moment, I felt like I was about to explode. William didn't just want Fiona. He wanted to prove that he could still touch everything that belonged to me, no matter how hard I tried to distance myself. I thought to myself, no way. This is my limit. I couldn't hold back anymore. I charged straight at them, rage erupting from my chest. My voice was sharper and more tense than I intended, but there was no other way. What the hell is going on here? William turned, his eyes glazed over, clouded by alcohol. He tried to maintain his balance, taking half a step towards me, his legs wobbly. Unexpectedly, he grabbed my shoulder for a moment, an action he probably thought was friendly. But for me, it was the last straw. I threw his hand off me with all the contempt I had accumulated over the years. William sighed, his breath reeking of alcohol. What I didn't expect was his unusual tone. He no longer had the arrogance or condescending attitude I was used to. Instead, he looked weak, exhausted, as if something had broken him from the inside. William, his voice trembling, mumbled, "I'm sorry." I froze, not believing my ears. He took a step back, his hands hanging limp, the arrogance and cunning gone from his eyes. Instead, deep regret filled his cloudy eyes, as if he was seeing something he couldn't face. I furrowed my brow, incredulous, and asked again, "What did you say?" William sighed, sadness etched on his face. "I'm sorry. I'm truly sorry for everything. About Violet, about you. I don't know what to say anymore." The surprise left me speechless, watching the man who used to be my best friend, now crumbling before my eyes. William stood there, eyes brimming with tears, and blurted out, his voice choked as if all the pain he'd been hiding finally burst out. "William," in a fit of anguish, you were right about her?" I stood still, shocked, unable to believe my ears. William, the man I always thought was callous and arrogant, was now sobbing in front of me and everyone else. His sobs echoed in the air like a punch to reality, almost making me forget my initial anger. "William," loudly, to the group of our mutual friends, "she's a psycho." The harsh words sliced through the air like a sharp knife, silencing everyone around. He continued, his voice thick with emotion, as if the secrets he'd kept for so long were now impossible to hide. "William, desperate, I'm trapped with her. I can't get out. Everything's a mess. Violet, she destroyed me, and I don't know how to get out of this mess." I didn't know how to react. The man in front of me wasn't the arrogant, cold William the first knew. He was completely broken, as if imprisoned by his own bad decisions. I stayed silent, unable to speak. Then, unexpectedly, William turned to Fiona. He stood there, dazed but sincere, as if the last thing he needed to do in his drunken state was to speak from the heart. "William," in a low voice, "I just want you to know, he's a good man." Fiona, with calm eyes but clear confusion, just nodded slightly, as if she couldn't fully grasp what was happening. "Fiona, thank you." As William turned back to face me, his hesitation was evident in his unsteady steps. He wanted to say something more, but his heavy eyes and trembling lips couldn't form the words. Before he could continue, I caught Fiona's eye. She looked at me as if she couldn't believe what she'd witnessed. Fiona, in utter disbelief, could only manage to utter, "What the hell just happened?" I didn't know what to say. William, the man who had shattered my life, was now standing there, completely broken in front of everyone, and I, who thought I'd escaped it all, was caught in a whirlwind of mixed emotions. William stumbled away, his wobbly legs disappearing down a dark hallway. His footsteps faded, leaving a heavy silence that engulfed the space. Fiona and I shared a look, no words needed to understand. Fiona's eyes reflected weariness, and I knew we both felt it was time to end the night. There was no reason to stay, especially when the party could easily explode with unwanted drama. We silently slipped out of the crowd, dodging people who were still laughing and enjoying themselves, and quickly made our way to the exit, without looking back. The music and laughter from the hall faded into the distance, while Fiona and I stepped outside, the coldness of the late night enveloping us. I sighed, glanced at Fiona, and said softly, "I don't want to get involved in this anymore. Tonight was crazy enough." Fiona chuckled, nodding in agreement. "Yeah, that was more than enough. Let's go." There was no need to say more. We quickly walked towards the car, leaving behind all the chaos and mixed emotions of the evening. Sitting in the car, I felt a sense of relief begin to creep in as we drove away, but my mind was still swirling with everything that had happened. William, his sudden confession, and the deep regret I never thought I'd see from that man. Looking at Fiona beside me, I silently thanked her for being in my life. Without her, I wasn't sure I could have handled everything so calmly. On the way home, in the quiet space of the car, both Fiona and I were silent, lost in our own thoughts. The car engine hummed softly in the darkness, creating a rhythmic beat that helped me temporarily escape the swirling emotions of the evening. Then, as if unable to bear the silence any longer, Fiona broke the stillness. Fiona turned and asked, her voice low but curious, "How do you feel about what just happened?" I pondered for a moment, weighing my emotions. I should have felt angry or even hurt seeing William crumble, but oddly, I didn't. I turned to Fiona, being honest with myself and with her. I exhaled softly, replying, "I'm happy. Weirdly happy, actually." Fiona furrowed her brow, perhaps surprised by my answer, but she listened quietly. I continued, my voice calm. "You can't deny the satisfaction of seeing William, the man who destroyed my marriage, finally face the consequences he deserves. He put himself in the trap he helped build. Now he's stuck. It brings a sense of satisfaction I can't deny." Fiona nodded slightly, as if understanding my feelings. She didn't respond immediately, probably letting my words settle in her mind. Fiona, after a moment, said softly, "Maybe he's facing what you went through, the feeling of being trapped, with no way out." I looked at Fiona, sensing empathy in her words. She understood that William wasn't just facing punishment, he was having to live with the consequences he'd created, consequences I had once endured. But there was something else I hadn't said, something that made me even happier than seeing him face the consequences. I sighed, a faint smile forming on my lips. "I'm happy for that, but I'm even happier knowing that I escaped, and now I have you." Fiona turned to me, a soft, meaningful smile spreading across her face. In that moment, I realized a truth clearer than ever. The pain of the past no longer held me captive. William and Violet were ghosts that haunted my life, but now they were just old memories. I had moved past them, and most importantly, I had found peace with Fiona. We continued driving in silence, but it was no longer the tense silence, it was peaceful and understanding. Eventually, I pulled up in front of her house, the yellow streetlights illuminating the quiet scene. Fiona turned to me, the smile still on her face, but this time, her eyes were filled with warmth. "Fiona," gently, "thank you for tonight." I just smiled back, my heart full of emotions I couldn't fully express. Fiona leaned towards me, and before I knew it, her lips gently touched mine in a sweet kiss. A brief moment, but full of meaning. All the worries and tension of the evening seemed to vanish completely. It was just me and her, in the peace we both longed for. As the kiss ended, Fiona chuckled, said goodbye, and got out of the car, waving at me before going inside. I sat in the car, watching her disappear behind the door, feeling strangely relieved. A part of me had found the peace I thought I'd never have again. I got back in the car, placing my hand on the steering wheel, looking out at the quiet road ahead. I started the engine, driving home, my heart brimming with gratitude that finally, after everything, I could move on and start anew with Fiona by my side. Back home, I walked inside quietly, sensing the stillness of the apartment. After a long, stressful day, all I needed was peace. I placed my keys on the table, headed straight for the bathroom, washed my face, brushed my teeth before bed, trying to shake off any lingering tension from the evening. Getting into bed, I reached for my phone and texted Fiona to let her know I got home safely. After a few seconds, she replied, and we ended our conversation with goodnight wishes, this time through voice notes. Fiona's gentle voice came through, easing any remaining stress. "Sleep well, my love." I responded, softly but sincerely, "Sleep well, too. See you tomorrow." After ending the conversation, I put my phone down, but instead of sleeping immediately, I grabbed my laptop and opened Reddit, an old habit of mine when night fell. I scrolled through posts, drawn to the relationships community, where people shared and sought advice on the complex situations in their personal lives. I had once posted there when my life shattered because of Violet and William's affair, and I had received a lot of encouraging advice. Those words helped me move forward and find peace in my life. I clicked on a new post and was immediately drawn to the title. "I accidentally impregnated my best friend's wife, stole her from him, and now I deeply regret it. My heart ached." The familiar feeling of pain and betrayal returning. I continued reading, trying to maintain my composure as the story unfolded before me. The anonymous post, "She always blows everything out of proportion, nagging me about every little thing when I get home from work. We live together, and I realize I made a huge mistake. I only have one day off a week, but she makes me do everything, never letting me rest. If I don't finish, she compares me to my ex-husband, saying how dedicated he was, how perfect he was. What should I do now?" I sat there, frozen. His story was too similar to what I'd experienced, but this time, the odd thing was the regret that seemed to have come back to the betrayer, William, no one else. Although the post didn't name names, I didn't need more details to realize it was him. The man who had stolen my wife was now regretting his decision. I sighed, leaned back against the headboard, feeling a mix of satisfaction and something akin to relief. Maybe that's how life worked? Truth always found its way back. He was facing what I had endured, maybe even worse. It made me realize that those who hurt others don't always end up happy. I clicked on the comments section, thinking about writing something, but then stopped. There was no need to get involved in William's misery. He had walked that path himself, and now he was suffering the consequences. I just closed my laptop, turned off the lights, and lay down, feeling a sense of peace washing over me. I had moved past it all, and now I had a new future, with Fiona by my side. After reading that Reddit post, I felt like that was enough for one day. I closed my laptop, placed it on my nightstand, and snuggled under the covers. Outside, the night air was quiet, and my mind was occupied only with thoughts of a brighter future with Fiona. The anxieties and pain of the past gradually faded as I drifted off to sleep, dreaming of the happy days ahead. The next morning, I woke up after a deep and restful sleep. A sense of lightness washed over me as I stretched, ready to face a new day. After getting ready, I eagerly walked into the kitchen, turned on the coffee maker, and breathed in the rich, fresh aroma of a new day. My mind was already thinking about whether to text Fiona about weekend plans. Suddenly, the doorbell rang, breaking the stillness of the house. Surprised, I thought maybe Fiona had arrived early to surprise me. A smile crept onto my lips, and I quickly went to open the door, filled with a light-hearted joy. But that joy quickly faded. As the door opened, I froze. Standing before me wasn't Fiona, but Violet, standing with her daughter and William. Jade, the little girl I had loved like my own daughter. Violet stood with her head down, her face tense, holding Jade's hand tightly. The little girl looked at me with innocent eyes, unaware of the past between us, making my heart sink for a moment. Violet hesitated, her voice trembling. "Please, let us stay with you for a few days. My family, William and I, are having a fight. I don't know where else to go." I stood there, my heart constricting. In a moment, all the dark memories of the past came flooding back. The affair, the betrayal, the pain of discovering Jade wasn't mine. I had thought I'd overcome it all, that Violet and William no longer had any influence on my life. But now, she was standing right at my doorstep, begging for help, with the little girl I had once cherished unconditionally. I felt a chill. I should have refused. There was no reason for me to be entangled in Violet and William's messy lives anymore. But as I looked down and saw Jade, the innocent child, the one who knew nothing of the complicated and harsh realities of her parents' lives, I couldn't completely abandon them. Even though she wasn't my child, I had loved her. I had considered her family. I sighed, feeling powerless and confused. Part of me wanted to shut that door forever, but another part couldn't ignore the child's situation. In the end, I reluctantly opened the door wider, stepping aside to let them in. I said, my voice cold and not very welcoming, "All right, come in, but just for a few days." Violet nodded, her eyes filled with gratitude and exhaustion. She led Jade inside, and I felt the air in my home become heavier than ever. My heart was still cold, but I knew I couldn't turn my back on the innocent child, even though my life was now far removed from Violet and William's troubles. As the door closed behind them, I told myself I would have to face this situation somehow. I let Violet and Jade settle on the couch in the living room, the heaviness of the situation filling the space. Violet sat silently, and Jade, the little girl I had once loved as my own daughter, sat beside her, her innocent eyes unaware of what was happening around her. I took a deep breath, then walked into the kitchen, not wanting to prolong the tension any longer. In the kitchen, I made another cup of coffee for Violet, pondering the awkward situation I was facing. All I wanted was a peaceful day, but now I had to confront the past I had tried to forget. As the water boiled, I silently grabbed a few apples, quickly peeling and slicing them into small pieces for Jade. Whatever else was happening, she was still an innocent child in this. I returned to the living room with the coffee and the prepared fruit. Setting them down on the table, I tried to maintain a calm demeanor. Jade, in a soft but innocent voice, spoke, "Thank you, Dad." Those words made my heart sink in a flash. Dad, the word she had used to call me for 4 years, a title that now brought more pain than joy. I stood still, feeling a pang of sadness, but I kept a cold expression. It wasn't true anymore. I wasn't her dad. William was. I sat down opposite Violet, my eyes fixed on her without saying anything for a moment. Finally, unable to bear the silence any longer, I broke the tense atmosphere with a cold tone. "What happened?" Violet lowered her head, her eyes filled with resentment as she began to tell me. "Violet, William yelled at me. Last night when he came home late, I asked him where he'd been all day without saying anything. We got into a fight, and then he left. I couldn't stay there anymore. We left without knowing where to go." She paused for a moment, as if trying to keep her composure in her tangled situation. I sat listening, unable to avoid a pang of bitterness as I saw her now as a completely different person, not the Violet I once knew, the one who had shattered my life. "Violet," her voice trembling, said, "my family, they've turned their backs on me for a long time after I betrayed you. Now I have nowhere to go. Both Jade and we don't have much money." I looked at her, not revealing any emotion. Her story angered me, but not because she was struggling, but because it could have been avoided. William, the man she had chosen over me, was now the one who made her run away. Everything she was going through was the consequence of her choices. But the only one I felt sorry for was Jade, the child who knew nothing about the complexities of adults and didn't deserve this unstable life. I sighed, trying to remain calm. "Just a few days, Violet. I'm not getting involved in your and William's business anymore." Violet nodded, her eyes red-rimmed as if on the verge of tears. She understood I was no longer the unconditional support I once was. She had lost that a long time ago. I sat for a moment, looking at Violet and Jade, feeling a wave of claustrophobia. Everything about this situation made me uncomfortable: their sudden appearance, the painful past resurfacing, and the awkwardness of the present. Finally, I stood up, needing to escape this heavy air, at least temporarily. I said, my voice cold, "I have some errands to run. You two stay here." Violet nodded, saying nothing, and I quickly grabbed my car keys and left the house, which now felt foreign to me. As I drove away from the neighborhood, I didn't know where to go until I realized I was driving straight towards Fiona's house. She was the only person I wanted to see right now, the only person who could help me make sense of everything. I pulled up in front of her house, knocked on the door, and a few seconds later, Fiona opened it with a smile, but it quickly vanished as she saw my tense expression. "Fiona, worried. What's wrong? Why do you look so stressed?" I sighed, stepped inside, and summarized the entire situation, from Violet and Jade unexpectedly showing up at my place, to the story of her conflict with William. As I spoke, I felt like I was being pulled back into the black hole of the past I had tried to escape. I said, my voice pleading, "I think maybe it's best if I move in with you for a while. Let Violet and Jade stay at my place until they find another place. They have nowhere to go." Fiona reacted instantly, her voice firm. "Are you crazy? That's not a solution." She looked at me as if she couldn't believe what I had just suggested. I tried to explain that Jade was still a child. She didn't deserve to be homeless just because of her parents' mistakes. But Fiona didn't let me finish. Fiona, her voice straight, yes, Jade is an innocent child, but you moving out and leaving them at your place isn't the answer. She's had a long time away from the man she still thinks is her dad, and now you're going to leave her. You can't do that. I was speechless, realizing she was right. I couldn't abandon Jade, the child who was innocent in all of this. But having Violet and Jade stay alone at my place wasn't something I wanted either. I felt myself trapped between the past and the present, not knowing how to handle the situation. There was no other option. I turned to another idea, even though I knew I'd have to beg. So can you move in with me for a few days, just until things settle down? You know, I can't face this alone. Fiona looked at me, her eyes filled with displeasure but also a little sympathy. I knew she didn't want to be involved in my messy past, but she couldn't leave me like this. Fiona, after a moment of hesitation, sighed, "You know how to make it hard to say no, fine, but just for a few days, and you have to make sure this doesn't go on forever." I offered a relieved smile, even though I knew I had just persuaded Fiona with a request that wouldn't be easy. "Thank you. I promise I won't let things get out of hand." Fiona shook her head, but the quirk of her lips showed she understood the awkward predicament I was in. Then we started making arrangements so she could come to my place for a few days, hoping that things would settle down quickly, and I wouldn't be dragged back into the past I had left behind. After convincing Fiona to come home with me, we packed quickly. I took Fiona's bag out to the car, feeling a mix of emotions. The situation was truly uncomfortable, and I knew it would be difficult for both of us. But now, having reached this point, there was no turning back. I drove Fiona to my place, trying to maintain my composure, even knowing what was coming. When I opened the door to my house, the air thickened as Jade ran out of the living room, her innocent eyes looking at Fiona and asking, "Who is she, Dad?" Before I could answer, Fiona stepped forward with a bright smile, not giving me a chance to interject. "She's the nanny. She'll play with you while I'm here." Jade beamed, clearly thrilled to have a new nanny. Violet stood nearby, a flicker of guilt on her face as she looked at Fiona, but she probably didn't know what to say in this situation. I was about to speak up, but Fiona suddenly stopped me with a knowing look, implying this was the best way to keep things light, and maybe she was right. Jade, quickly forgetting the tense situation around her, happily took Fiona's hand, excitedly dragging her into the living room to play. The little girl, seemingly oblivious to the complicated circumstances, was already engaged with Fiona, who was doing a great job of putting Jade at ease. Violet glanced at me, her eyes a mix of guilt and old emotions. "Thank you for everything." I just nodded, not responding. Things were getting more complicated than ever. The rest of the day passed in an atmosphere of awkwardness and discomfort. When I wanted to approach Fiona to talk or simply sit next to her, everything felt strained. I didn't want Violet to feel uncomfortable, but her presence made us all more distant. Dinner was no better, eaten in tense silence. No one really knew what to say, and every time I tried to speak, Fiona would subtly shake her head, as if telling me to let things be. Finally, when it was time for bed, Jade created another awkward situation. With her innocent eyes, she grabbed Fiona's hand and said in her sweet little voice, "Can you sleep with me? And then Baba and Mama can sleep together." Those words froze the air in the room. I felt my throat tighten, not knowing how to react. Fiona looked at me with understanding, and she, seeming to trust me completely, just smiled and nodded. "Okay, I'll sleep with you, but you have to sleep well, okay?" She stood up, took Jade's hand, and led her to the guest room, leaving Violet and me standing there, awkwardly in a room full of old memories. When Fiona and Jade were out of sight, Violet and I went into the room that had once been our space as a married couple. The room had changed a lot since she had left, but the empty wall was still there, where our wedding picture used to hang. Violet slowly walked through the room, her voice nostalgic. "This room, it used to be ours. That empty wall, it's where we used to hang our wedding picture. I remember those cozy days when it was just us, and with Jade." She stopped, her eyes scanning the room, as if searching for lost memories. But for me, it was just the past, a past I'd left behind. I looked around the room, feeling nothing but emptiness. Everything had changed, and it wasn't ours anymore. Waiting a bit to make sure Jade was asleep, I grabbed a pillow, intending to leave the room and sleep on the couch in the living room. But just as I was about to step out the door, Violet grabbed my wrist, her voice trembling with emotion. Do we still have a chance?" I stopped, standing still for a moment. Her question brought everything to a halt, but I had only one clear answer in my head. I shook my head, my voice calm but firm. "No, Violet, I'm very happy with Fiona. I respect you, but that's because of Fiona and Jade. I hope you have enough self-respect to understand that." I looked directly into her eyes, seeing the breakdown there, but I no longer had space for these conflicting emotions. Then, I gently removed her hand from my wrist and stepped out of the room, leaving Violet with her thoughts. That night, I lay on the couch, my eyes fixed on the ceiling, thinking about everything. I knew I had chosen the right path, and now I just needed to keep moving forward, even though that path would have many thorns. I spent the whole night on the hard couch, and by early morning my back was aching. My mind was still foggy when I shifted, only to realize that Fiona was standing in front of me, a mischievous smile playing on her lips. I winced, trying to sit up, awkwardly rubbing my back. Fiona chuckled, teasing, "That couch is really comfy, huh? Maybe next time you should consider sleeping on a real bed." I shook my head, offering a weak smile, but I still felt grateful that she could joke after a stressful day like yesterday. I said jokingly, "Yeah, I should think twice before becoming a couch knight again." Fiona laughed softly, but before the conversation could continue, Violet came out of the kitchen, still holding a hand towel. She looked sad, but she tried to remain composed. "Breakfast is ready. I think maybe Jade and I will only stay for one more day. I don't want to be a burden on you and Fiona anymore," she said hesitantly, her eyes avoiding our gaze. I understood that Violet felt guilty and probably didn't want her presence to disrupt my life. Even though things were still very difficult and awkward, I couldn't help but feel a twinge of compassion in her voice. I nodded calmly, my voice steady. "It's up to you, Violet, but if you need time, I'm not bothered." Fiona stood next to me, looking at Violet with empathy, but without saying anything more. She let Violet make her own decision and didn't push or pressure her. After speaking, Violet just nodded and silently turned to go upstairs to wake Jade up for breakfast. When she was out of sight, I turned to Fiona, sighing with relief. The tension seemed to have eased a bit, but there was still an awkwardness hanging in the air. Fiona looked at me, still with a gentle smile, but she couldn't hide her fatigue. "Maybe you shouldn't become a couch hero again. A sore back all day is not easy." I chuckled softly, replying, "Lesson learned." We both stood there, sharing a brief moment of mutual understanding. No matter how many difficulties we faced, Fiona was still there, walking through them with me, and that was the biggest source of encouragement. We were about to walk into the dining room to start breakfast when Jade ran downstairs, chattering in her pajamas, her eyes lighting up when she saw everyone. Violet followed behind her, looking tired but trying to stay positive so things wouldn't be too tense. Breakfast was ready, and I couldn't help but feel a sense of relief that things were at least settling down, even if only for this moment. Breakfast was laid out on the table in what felt like a calmer atmosphere than the tense energy of yesterday. Violet had prepared a simple but filling meal, and we all sat down together. Me, Fiona, Violet, and Jade, all eating in a comfortable silence, trying to maintain as much normalcy as possible. Jade's soft laughter while she enjoyed her breakfast and talked about the game she wanted to play with the beautiful nanny was the only thing that softened the air a bit. When breakfast was over, I felt a sense of calm, thinking that at least things were going relatively peacefully, despite the tension still simmering inside me. But just as I stood up to clear the table, Violet suddenly spoke, breaking the fragile calm. "Jade, say goodbye to Daddy, we're leaving right after Mom finishes packing." Violet's words made me freeze, and immediately I saw Jade look up, her eyes full of confusion. Not understanding why she had to leave, the little girl started to fuss, fear and confusion evident in her childlike eyes. "Leave? Isn't this our house? No, I don't want to go anywhere. I don't want to live with the small daddy. I want to live with the big daddy." Her words pierced my heart. Big Daddy, that was me. The one she still called Dad, even though I was no longer truly her father. Jade continued to fuss, tears starting to stream down her face, trying to cling to her chair. "The small daddy doesn't love me. I haven't had enough time to play with the beautiful nanny." Her words were like a twist in my gut. Even though she wasn't my biological child, Jade had been the center of my life for the first 4 years of her life. And now, seeing her torn between two fathers, one who still loved her as before, and one who clearly didn't give her enough love, I felt helpless. I wanted to say something, to hug Jade, but Violet got there first. She scooped up Jade, who was now sobbing, her eyes filled with guilt and regret. But even so, she knew she couldn't stay here any longer. She had to face reality, the life she had chosen. "Violet," her voice choked but resolute, said to me, "Thank you for everything, but Jade and I have to go." I looked at her, wanting to say something to keep Jade here a little longer, but I couldn't. I didn't want to cause more problems or hurt Fiona, the woman I loved and had promised to move forward with. Violet bowed her head, thanking me again, then quickly stepped out the door, holding Jade, who was still crying. I just stood there, feeling my heart grow heavy as I watched them leave, with Jade's cries fading in the distance. I knew this was the right thing to do, but it didn't make the pain any easier. Jade was the innocent child in all of this, and seeing her suffer like this made me feel powerless and heartbroken. Fiona stood there, witnessing the whole scene with a look of sadness. When Violet carried the crying Jade out the door, the little girl's distress not only touched my heart but also choked up Fiona. I saw her reach up to wipe away a tear, trying to stay composed, but her emotion was clear. That little girl, she's too young to understand. Her words weighed heavily on my heart. Yes, Jade was too young to comprehend the complexities of adults. She only knew how to love and bond with those who had been her family. And now she had to bear the separation and pain that didn't belong to her. I sighed, saying nothing, simply drawing Fiona into my arms, hugging her tightly. I knew she felt heartbroken for Jade, and I did too. I whispered, I know, Fiona. We stood still for a moment, silence enveloping us both, but it was no longer tense, it was empathy, sharing the pain and also understanding that there were things in life we couldn't change, no matter how much we wanted to. Despite everything, I couldn't forget Jade's innocent and tearful eyes, or her voice when she called me Big Daddy. I knew I couldn't go back to the past, couldn't undo what had been lost, but there was a part of me that couldn't abandon her. Even though I wasn't Jade's biological father, I still had a responsibility to her, at least to the best of my ability. A few days later, when things had settled down, I made a decision. I couldn't let Jade live in poverty or be abandoned because of the mess in Violet and William's lives. Even though they had caused me so much pain, Jade didn't deserve to be collateral damage. I sat in front of my computer, opened my bank account, and set up a monthly transfer to Violet's account. The amount wasn't huge, but it was enough to ensure that Jade could be better cared for. I didn't want Violet to know it was support for her daughter. I just hoped she would use the money to raise Jade well, so she could have the happy life I could no longer give her directly. After setting up the transfer, I sat quietly for a moment, my gaze drifting out the window, where sunlight was starting to peek through the blinds. I whispered to myself, I hope they do the right thing, not for Violet, but for Jade. Fiona walked into the room, quietly coming to my side. She didn't say anything, just placed her hand on my shoulder and looked at me with deep understanding. I knew she had realized the decision I had made, and even though it wasn't easy, she supported me. You're a good man, and I know Jade will have a better future because of this. I offered a faint smile, finding comfort in her words. Even though things hadn't worked out as I dreamed, I knew I had done what I could to ensure that Jade wouldn't suffer. My life was now about Fiona, about the new future we would build together. But no matter what, I would continue to watch over Jade from afar, hoping that she would have a more peaceful life, even without me by her side.